Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I had a subscriber ask a question, which I'll flip in here. A little bit of a complex question. He basically wants to know if you're going to train for life, for a lifetime of training and trying to make continual but slow progress as you advance over the years of training, would you be better off just running some sort of basic, slow, micro-loading linear progression, or would you be better off periodizing? So let me put on my +5 out of weaponsmithing. Work on a little bit of crafting, and let's talk about that. In most simplistic terms, I guess it depends upon what it is you're doing. Are you just training for overall fitness and strength and health and body composition for the rest of your life? I could easily say some sort of linear progression, but it's not going to be that simple. However, if your goals are competitive in nature, you need to be doing some sort of periodization. That's just the real world. Because in a competitive environment, a 1 or 2 or 3% advantage makes a difference sometimes between first place and 10th place, or first place and 50th place. That's the nature of competitive sports. Strength sports, every other type of sport. It doesn't matter. A few percentages is sometimes the difference between the winner and the loser. Periodization gives you that sort of advantage by preventing stalls. Now, the thing that you've got to look at is for people who aren't chasing that 1% or 2% advantage in a true competitive environment, I could just as easily say, yeah, just focus upon some sort of little short-term micro-loading linear progression. However, what people need to understand is that it's not going to be as simple as the way he described. Can you just, whenever you're capable, add the little 2.5-pound plates? Or get you some 1 1/4 plates if you want to go up 2 or 2.5 pounds every now and then. So even your 400-pound sets, you could periodically add 2 pounds and make your 405 a 407, and then turn that into a 409 or a 410. In theory, yes, you could micro-load forever, but you will stall that way eventually, simply because you can't really micro-load even down small enough for that, and even little fluctuations in your body weight are eventually going to become a problem. What people need to understand is that with every year that you train, you get such tremendously diminished returns that sometimes you don't even see measurable progress eventually once you've been training for years. Sometimes you will go 3 months, 6 months, 10 months without any measurable progress. Your progress will be so small that you might not even be able to count it in 2.5 or 5 pounds on a bar. It can actually be that small at that point. It doesn't mean you didn't make progress. It's just they're just so diminished that it's no longer measurable with such big numbers. And it sounds crazy, but it's the truth. It's just because, again, your gains are cut in half for every time period. So what ends up happening, you'll seem like you're stalling for really, really prolonged periods of time, but the truth is you may have been able to add 1/2 pound to a lift. And that's why it becomes important to mess with rep ranges a little bit. Like I said, you could in theory micro-load that way, but what you're going to find sometimes is the same thing that periodization finds. Once you get really advanced, oftentimes you're running a 12-week block of periodization, even on a linear periodization, to where you're working with 10 rep sets for 3 weeks in blocks, 8 rep, then 5 rep, then 3 rep. In 3-week blocks, running standard block periodization, to where all you're trying to do is hopefully add 5 pounds to a lift. And when I say 5 pounds to a lift, people need to understand we're talking about all-around strength. I don't mean your 1 rep max. People can train for strength without ever testing or knowing their 1 rep max. But how about adding 5 pounds to your 5 rep max, your 8 rep max, your 10 rep max? That is still strength. Even working in those ranges that people think of as far more hypertrophy oriented, adding a few pounds to a lift adds muscle mass. It's progressive overload. But again, the problem is sometimes for someone who's been training for 5+ years, they're sometimes working for 12 weeks on a periodized program, pre-programmed like that into special blocks to try to get 5 pounds on the lift. So you can see why with changes in progression being that slow at that point, it would hopefully make sense to a lot of people that when you're running just straight linear trying to micro-load, you can see why you might get frustrated or feel like you're not progressing. If they're doing that much work and calculations to try to add 5 pounds, and they don't always do it. They don't always do it as an advanced lifter, at least not without drugs. So they don't even get it every 12 weeks in their blocks. Do you think you're always going to notice a difference with micro-loading? No. And that's why I discussed for a little more advanced lifters of rep range changes. And again, this is perfectly acceptable because people need to understand once you advance, any progress is fantastic. But that's one reason I tell guys a very old school method. And yeah, it's going to be slightly slower than block periodization. It will produce a little slower results, but is it going to be enough slower that you're really going to notice? No, and it's going to be more noticeable. You're going to feel like you're progressing more than if you just try to micro-load with plates. It's about the psychological difference. Psychology is extremely important here. If you don't feel like you're making any progress at all, sometimes people get lazy, they get demotivated. Even though they know they've been training for 12 years, they want to see something somewhere every now and then. It's just kind of nice. If you do kind of the rep type system I described, sometimes it's easier to do that than actual weight loading with little micro plates. And what I tell a lot of people, and again, the example I always give, like either going from 5 to 8 reps or even up to 5 to 10 reps. This is a very old school method. It worked very, very well all through the 50s and 60s when guys just did normal full body training. They would come in and they would work on a lift till they were strong enough for the weight to, they start with the weight they could do 5 reps with. They would work on getting to 6, getting to 7, getting to 8. If they're doing a 5 to 8 rep system, or they'd work up to 10 if they're doing a 5 to 10. Now, you need to keep in mind, when you're an advanced lifter, taking a weight that you can do comfortably for 5 reps, it might be your 6 rep max or 7 rep max, and getting it up to where you can do 10 reps with it might take you an entire year. It might take you 2 years. But you have a set goal that you are working towards, and having a specific goal in your training that you're working towards, even if it's something so small as adding a rep every few months to an exercise with a relatively heavy weight. Keep in mind, we're talking about advanced lifters, people with at least 5 years of consistent, continual, serious training under their belt. You're going to get that advanced to where, yeah, you're actually going to be working towards, hey, can I add a couple reps with my 500-pound deadlift? And you're going to see that as an accomplishment, but you're working towards a measurable, tangible goal, knowing that when you get strong enough to get to your 8 reps, or you get strong enough to get to your 10 reps, or whatever way you're choosing to run this, and you know what? You don't have to be stagnant with it. You could change it year to year. You could be running it one way and change it a couple years down the road. You don't have to be dogmatic. But the whole point is, you're working towards that so that you can increase the weight on the bar, because when you get strong enough to do your 8 reps or your 10 reps or whatever, you add a little bit of weight and restart over. And sometimes what I would recommend with that is you don't go, oh, how much should I jump? What's the most I should jump? You should be looking at what's the least I should jump. That's where the micro-loading plates become useful. That's where you incorporate something like this, what this guy was talking about, because when you're advanced, every little bit counts. Meaning when you get to your 8 reps with your 405, you could just add your 5 pounds and drop back down to 5 reps again. And some people would be like, well, look, you might be able to do 7 already immediately. But that's not the point, because if you've increased that and that 8 rep is really, really hard, and you're an advanced lifter, if you're doing exercises with 400 and 500 pounds as an advanced lifter for 7 or 8 reps, you overreach pretty easily, particularly if you're not on a ton of drugs. And most people who aren't training competitively, who are using anything, they're probably using pretty small amounts. They're possibly even on TRT doses, or they're just completely natty. A lot of guys who used to do gear come completely off and just train later natty. I've known plenty of older guys who do that, or just go to TRT. They're going to overtrain easy. When you're throwing around 500 pounds on the deadlift, like you guys see me doing 7 reps, it's pretty fatiguing. Believe me, your peripheral nervous system can get shot from that one workout sometimes. That one exercise can hammer your peripheral nervous system for a week. Even though it wasn't a max, you had no grinders. That's the reality of lifting heavy weights for high volume, particularly as you start to get older. Yeah, you're strong, but it does take its toll. You got to recover from that. So the thing is, by only adding 5 pounds and dropping down, it allows a little bit of recovery, but you know what? You're not going to lose any muscle or strength because you've added weight to the bar. That's the beauty of it. Even though you go down from almost an overreaching state possibly because you hit some new PRs on a big lift, you give your body a little bit of a break by only increasing 5 pounds. Because yeah, that might be your 7 rep max instead of your 8 rep by adding 5 pounds. But you know what? You work with 5 reps and just slowly build back up because it gives your body recovery time. And that's something that advanced lifetime lifters learn about a lot as you get older. It's allowing that recovery time, that undulating effect as far as pushing yourselves and a little bit of back off, pushing yourself a little bit of back off. That actually allows you to make the most continued progress as you get older. If you still want to keep your size and strength and maybe gain a little bit more, that's how you do it without hurting yourself. That's one of the keys, is undulating those rate of perceived exertions. We won't even call it intensity because intensity is a fixed percentage. Rate of perceived exertion varies from day to day. It's very dynamic in nature. So you undulate your rate of perceived exertion, and it can even be month to month because you reached up really hard and then you add 5 pounds and drop way back down. You're really running 2 or 3 reps under your max. You're bringing that rate of perceived exertion down, and then you ramp it back up slowly over several weeks, a month, 2 months, so that you peak again. And that sort of training, as far as linear progression type training, can work very, very well for the older, more experienced lifters who just want to have a nice set goal that they know they're working towards, who want to keep from overtraining, who want to keep from overreaching, but they just want to just keep slowly getting better, a little bit at a time. Because that's the thing you have to remember, the human body thrives in micro-loading and small changes. That's usually where you do your absolute best. You will always improve that way. If you only just push a hair harder than you did before, just improve a little bit. It's the same way with running. It's not just weightlifting. You know, if you run 5 miles, try running 5.1 miles. You don't have to go straight to 6 or 7. Run 5.1. You won't even notice the difference. Then run 5.2 miles. Then 5.3 miles. You won't even notice the difference. But if you do that long enough, you'll find yourself running a marathon eventually. You'll eventually find that you can run 20 miles. Right? It's all micro-loading, guys. The human body thrives in that environment. So you could do that in a linear type system as you get older without having to mess with periodization, because you're not trying to glean a 1% advantage in competition. You're just trying to slowly get a little bit better than you were last year or a couple years ago. As you get up into your 30s or 40s, that's all you're trying to do. Be a little better than you used to be. Just pushing for a little more. You do it that way, you don't hurt yourself. You don't burn out. That's not a bad approach for someone who really wants to do that. So I would lean in the direction of something like a linear progression like that. Is a good way to do it as a lifetime lifter. And you know what? As you get older, some of those lifts may go down. And by the time you hit your 50s, your 60s, you're probably going to regress a little bit. But you know what? Doesn't mean you still can't use that kind of system. So sometimes when you regress, maybe push to try to get just a little bit of it back. A little bit of where you used to be, get some of it back. Again, not a bad way to do it. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.